Today, I'm going to be reviewing a Victory amp. Yeah, I know. So, some of you are probably wondering what's going on, and others are probably getting a little sense of deja vu. Let me explain. You see, if you search up my name in Victory amps, you'll find that in 2023, the summer of 2023, I launched an investigation into who was behind Victory amplifiers. The brand shot up out of nowhere, and the leadership and ownership of it seemed shrouded in secrecy. It was kept secret, and it seemed very unusual that that was the case. And in that investigation, I uncovered that a co-owner of the brand was none other than Lee Anderton. Now, Lee is a very popular and influential figure in the guitar gear industry, with a YouTube channel with several 100,000 subscribers. And finding out that for a decade he had been a co-owner of a brand that he was promoting on that channel and never once publicly disclosed it, it put a bad taste in my mouth. I did not like that one bit. You know, we talk about customer service issues on this channel, we talk about quality control issues on this channel, but when you're breaching advertising standards to actually millions of people, or at least millions of views, I'm not a fan of that. Some people insist that it was all public and everybody knew it, but the reality is that there is not one single instance, and no one can link me one single instance of it being publicly disclosed prior to my video, my publication. And equally, Lee openly has given reasons as to why it was kept secret, which kind of debunks the whole idea that it was open and it was public. It wasn't. It was intentionally kept a secret. Now, I previously owned, at one point I had 2 Victory amps. I ended up selling one or trading one for a guitar, but I still own one Victory amplifier. And when I was doing this investigation and I found this all out, and it soured the whole brand for me, I pulled my review video that I did on the Victory Kraken. So I'm just editing this video now, and I think it might be worth expanding a little bit on the reason that I pulled the review, just giving you some more context. If I pull up a screen from the Anderton's Big Secret video, where I showcased that Lee was in fact a secret co-owner of Victory amps, in my conversation with Lee, this was one of the things he said. He says, "As you can probably tell, I'd much rather people watched and read articles about the amps themselves than about who owns what. But I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not this is interesting enough to publish. I'd rather you spent the time doing an amp review, smiley face." And it's safe to say that that last sentence really annoyed me. It's like, I'd much prefer you spent the time doing an amp review. And I'm like, A, I already did an amp review, and B, yet no shit you'd prefer I do an amp review, a video showcasing a product from a company that you're secretly a co-owner of, rather than publishing that you've been a secret co-owner of the company for the last decade. Yeah, I know you'd prefer I spent the time doing the amp review. So I was like, at the time, before I even published the video, I just pulled the review video, because that annoyed me. But I've now come to see that pulling that video was not the right move, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't benefit anybody. If anything, it is a disadvantage to customers who are trying to find out if a product works for them or not. You know, because there's reviews from a co-owner of the brand, and then there's a lot of reviews from friends and close personal friends of the co-owner of the brand. It wouldn't hurt to have a review from someone who bought these amplifiers, owned them for an extensive period of time, and gigged with them, and found things that they liked and disliked. So I think it deserves a reshoot. Let's talk about this. This is the Victory VX Kraken. And this is the Mark I version of this amplifier, the original version of this amp. There has since been, last year I think, there was released a version 2, a Mark II of the Victory Kraken. And I'll do my best to compare the specs, but I will say that the three things that I dislike about this amplifier I don't see have been resolved or fixed in any way on the Mark II. In fact, one of them seems to have been made potentially worse. So we're going to take a look. I'm going to tell you the good things and the bad things about this amplifier. Let's start with the specs. This is a 2-channel high-gain lunchbox head. At the moment it's got 6L6 tubes in it for the power section, although this can take EL34s as well. The controls are quite straightforward. We have a gain 1 and a gain 2. The channels are supposed to represent Marshall-esque on gain 1. And for gain 2, it's supposed to sound a little bit more saturated, thicker. It's the Mesa Boogie sound. You've got a little physical switch here that you can switch between the channels, and then you've got a shared EQ among both channels. You've got the bass, middle, and treble. And then finally, you've got a Master 1 and a Master 2. And I really like this feature. I think this is a good one. It makes sense. It's like it was designed by a gigging guitar player, because as far as I know, it was some input from Rabia Masad on this amplifier. So Master 1 is your main master volume. That's what you're going to set for your rhythm tone, right? And then Master 2 isn't switchable with any switch on the physical amplifier. So without the Footswitch, this doesn't matter. But you can bump it up a little bit and have that for a volume boost for a solo. It makes sense for gigging. You can control your own volume for that solo to make sure that it's heard. I do really like that feature. I think it's a really good feature. Unfortunately, we'll talk about the negative aspect of that, where it's let down. But as it stands, that feature I really, really like. I think that's great. Now, tone-wise, when I was using this amplifier, I mainly used just gain 1, because I found it was quite versatile. If I kept the gain under 12 o'clock, or maybe even just under 1 o'clock, I could boost it with an overdrive, and that's where the amplifier really sounded the best, because there was one general complaint from a lot of people with this amp, and that's it doesn't have a presence knob. A presence knob absolutely would have improved this amplifier, and Victory did take that on board and put a presence knob, presence control, on the Mark II version of this amplifier. To get around this though, I simply just boosted the amp with an overdrive, boosted the treble a little bit, and kind of got that presence sizzle that it was missing. And the reason that gain 1 was good was because I could roll my volume down on the guitar, take the overdrive off, roll the volume down, and I would get a perfectly usable clean tone. Preference-wise, I never really used gain 2 that much, but it's very saturated, and if you like that sort of American-esque sound, that is, I mean, it does the job. Now, another feature that's kind of cool on this amplifier is the amount of power switching you have on it. At the moment, it's a 50-watt amplifier in a lunchbox head, which was, at the time, there weren't any 50 watts in lunchbox heads. That's actually one of the reasons that drew me to this amplifier. But the power switching is, you've got a high mode, which is your full 50, and then you've got a low mode, which is 15. And most amplifiers will be happy with that. But this amplifier has got some extra tricks up its sleeve. If we turn it around to the back, you'll see you've got this little cutout in the chassis of the amplifier, and there's a little switch that I can switch in 2 different ways. In the center, you've got both power valves. Then if you switch it, you've got one. If you switch it the other way, you've got the other. So you can kind of share the wear on one valve, firstly, but also you can lower the power usage significantly, which means that this amplifier doesn't just have 50 watts and 15 watts. It's also got, when you switch down to one tube, you've got 9 watts on full and 2 watts on the low mode. Now, I personally never really used this feature. 2 watts was always a little bit too quiet, but I can appreciate that that kind of set things apart a little bit. However, though, if you are someone who really likes this feature, you will only get this on the Mark I, as it seems that they've removed that feature on the Mark II. The Mark II, I think, is 50 watts or 9 watts. It's kind of a split between what you could get from this amplifier. This does have more options in that regard. Now, while we're on the back, what have we got? We've got the power switch on the back. We've got a 16, 8 and 8 ohm outs. We've got an effects loop, and we've got 2 outs for our foot switches. We'll talk about the foot switch a little bit later. But then we've got this. And point blank, I will tell you that when I was gigging with this amplifier, this was the bane of my existence. So what is this? Well, this is the bass focus switch. You press it in, and essentially you've got a high pass filter. It's cutting the lows out of the sound. And this amplifier, I understand why this is a feature. The amplifier is supposed to be from anywhere in the heavy spectrum of music. So you can range all the way up to modern metal, where you're using an 8-string and you want to remove a significant amount of bass from your sound. So totally understand where that comes from, your baritone playing, your 7 strings, all of that. 100% understand it. It's just not for me. And normally I would say, well, it's an extra feature. Just because I'm not using it doesn't mean it's bad, okay? Well, in this case, I think it is bad just in the way it's implemented, because I'm kind of forced to use it. This is a lunchbox head, right? It's not the lightest, but I wouldn't want to be hit over the head with it, but it's certainly available for travel. In fact, that's kind of what this whole Victory lunchbox head was designed to. It's designed to fit the EasyJet overhead specs. So it's a travel amplifier. It comes with a little gig bag that you can throw over your shoulder. It's not the strongest strap. I never actually trust it over my shoulder. I would always throw it over the shoulder and hold onto the handle as well, because it is heavy enough. I wouldn't trust the straps. But that's besides the point. You put it in the bag and you get to the gig. There have been countless times where I get to the gig, put the amplifier on the cab, set up the pedal board, plug in, and I have no bass. What's gone on? Is there something wrong with my guitar? No. Something changed on the pedal board? No. I'm looking at the amplifier. Is my bass all the way down? No, it's not. I'm thinking, is it the cabinet that I've got here? Is the speaker messed up? What's wrong with it? And only then do I remember, though yeah, there's that little switch on the back that removes a whole ton of bass from my sound. I switch it out and it's back. I think it's a pretty big tonal shaper on this amplifier, and there's nothing to indicate that it's on from the front of the amplifier. The only way to tell if it's on or not is by kind of fumbling around on the dark stage behind the amplifier and figuring out, oh, is it pressed in or is it not? And that's the other thing. right? This is a press-in switch. So you press it in and it's on, you press it out and it's off. And annoyingly, the switch protrudes more than any of the jacks. So it's the most likely thing to be hit on the back of the amplifier. When you put it into the gig bag, it gets pressed in every time. I'm not against having the feature, but I don't personally use the feature. I don't really like it when it's engaged, and it always gets engaged, and I have no way of telling whether it is or not from the front of the amplifier. And it's just like, okay, if it was on the front of the amplifier, if it was a switch like the channel switch or something, it's protected by these knobs. It's not going to get knocked. Even something like that, or even just an LED on the front to indicate whether it's on or not, would have been so much better than what it is. I really don't like how it's been implemented. And remember I said I felt that something was even made worse. Well, on the Mark II, they still have the base focus switch, same type of switch, same extruding out of the amplifier. It's going to get pressed in, and there's no indication of whether it is or not without just feeling it. But now they've added another switch, like a presence shift switch as well, so that's going to get knocked in as well. Two huge tone shaping things on this amplifier that are going to be hit accidentally without fail, because that happened every time I moved this amplifier. And I'd forget after, you know, having the amplifier in a room for however long, then going to gig, you forget about that little switch that you never use on the back, and then you get to the gig and, oh, why does it sound like that? And you're scrambling to try and figure out. That's kind of the biggest thing I never really liked about this amplifier, because I think without it pressed in, that's personally, I think it sounds good, but when it gets pressed in, it's not for me. Now, we're on to the negatives, so let's talk about the second negative. And it's, I guess it's a small thing, but it was annoying. Let me show you here. I'll show you the bottom of this. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a lot of scuff marks, right? There's a lot of scratches there in one specific place on the bottom of this amplifier. Now, there is a reason for that, and to show you, I'm going to grab an old school lunchbox head. This is the orange Tiny Terror, the first commercially successful lunchbox head. And the reason it was so successful, the reason for its design, the reason for lunchbox heads being popular in general, is being able to travel with them. They're very small amplifiers. The concept is you have your guitar on your back, you throw this over your shoulder in its little gig bag, and you get to the gig. Same with the Victory. You know, the Victory's entire size is spec'd to the overhead of a EasyJet luggage compartment. So it's definitely made for traveling without a cabinet, right? So you're going to be borrowing a cab. You know, one of the other bands on the bill is going to let you use their cabinet or something like that. Cool. Now what you're going to do there in most cases is, let's say they have their head too, let's say it's a Marshall-esque thing, you're just going to get there, you get your Tiny Terror, you pop it down on top of their amplifier, and you plug in and you play. Perfect. Now with the Victory you do the same thing, except it does not sit flat, ever. So this is the handle on top of my Zilla cab. It is the lowest profile handle I've come in contact with. It is as close to flat as I think is possible. And even on that, even though it's close, the Victory still can't sit on its own 2 feet. It's just sitting on top of the handle and sliding and scratching. Now let's say we encounter one of these thicker padded handles like we have here on this Bad Cat. It's not an entirely uncommon type of handle. I've seen them on Black Stars as well. The orange does struggle. So if I put the amp there on the center, as you can maybe see if I zoom in, it's just off the amp just a little bit. To try and put a reference number on that, I've got a couple of these 0.70 mil thick guitar picks, and the orange is approximately 6 picks off the amplifier on the front. So that there is the approximate distance that the Tiny Terror has when it encounters a thick handle. Now, before we get to the Victory, I want you to guess how many picks in distance do you think the Victory has? Okay, here's the Victory, and we're going to put it in the middle, so it's as fair as possible. And we'll actually make it sure that the back feet actually touch, because they actually don't. Have you made your predictions of how many picks it's going to be underneath the feet of the Victory? It's approximately 20. So just so you can visualize the two comparisons, this was the distance for the Tiny Terror. And this was the distance for the Victory. A considerable difference. Just a little feet comparison between these two lunchbox heads. This is the orange Tiny Terror foot, and then the Victory. It's almost half the height of the orange. It's a little bit wider, but it's the height that matters, and it's very, very short. Even on the lowest profile handles on top of amps, or even on top of cabinets, the amp does not sit flat. The feet are so small on this that it may as well not have feet at all. It just seems like a major design flaw, or it's maybe form over function. It looks good on a Victory cabinet, but it looks terrible on everything else. I really don't understand it. The only Victory lunchbox head that doesn't seem to have these tiny little feet are the Ritchie Kotzen amplifiers. They've got bigger feet on the head. I don't know why they don't just do it for this. For all of them in general, it would make the amplifiers look a lot less, like this, which isn't exactly, a selling point for them. The amplifiers get scratched up when you put them on like solid plastic or even metal handles. It doesn't look good, and it's such an easy problem that they could fix. In fact, I think they sell bigger feet, I think mainly for their cabinets, but they also sell amp feet on the Victory shop. Why not just throw in a couple of the bigger feet with each purchase? It would make so much more sense. I don't understand. And now finally, I don't know if I've mentioned this in other videos, but one of my pet peeves with amplifiers is the Footswitch, when the Footswitch is not thought out or it's cheaped out on. And Victory aren't the only amp brand to do this, like Marshall do it with everything as well. But let me show you the Victory one. So first I'm going to untangle the several meters worth of cable that is affixed to the Footswitch. You can't remove that cable. This is the cheapest of the cheap, made in China Footswitch that you can get. And, well, I mean, with the Victory logo double-side stick taped on. The reason that I know that is that mine fell off. It's still got some sticky on it, but maybe, I don't know. It shouldn't do that, by the way, because I've never used this. Or at least I've never gigged with this ever. Now, like I said, this is very, very similar, if not the exact same thing that the Marshall ones do. Neither are good. I want to stress that. But with the Victory one, it's more annoying. And the reason is, okay, well, let me explain why this isn't very good to begin with. For one, you've got the cable permanently affixed. And if we get to the other end of the cable, eventually, hold on. Okay, it is a solid plastic molded end, which means that if this breaks, it's a cable, you're plugging in and out, you're playing different gigs, it's most likely to break kind of on this end. Your Footswitch is done. You're gone, right? So for one, they sell the replacements of this cheap Footswitch on the Victory site, kind of acknowledging that you might need a replacement. It's also absolutely huge, so there's no incentive to put this on a pedal board, and the permanently affixed cable also makes it not particularly professional. This isn't professional grade. The amplifier is supposed to be professional grade. The Footswitch just simply isn't. Now, I do want to be fair. This is very similar to the Marshall Footswitch, if not the exact same. Both are not good. But what makes it more annoying for the Victory side of things, well, there's a couple of things that make it more annoying. The first is that we know Victory can do better, and they know it too. If you go onto the Victory website, they will sell you an upgraded Footswitch, a much more professional Footswitch for these amplifiers that has a removable cable. So if the cable breaks, your Footswitch just isn't dead. It's still pretty big. I would prefer it to be smaller so it's a bit more pedalboard friendly, but it's actually a professional Footswitch instead of this thing. This is bedroom grade at best. I would never, like, a touring artist using one of these? No, it's not going to happen. They can do better. Do you know how much they will charge to do better? £80. That is $100 for a Footswitch. Plus shipping, of course. And that seems to me like it's just a pure acknowledgement that yes, this isn't very good. You will want the other one, but we're going to charge a lot more for it. And it just seems a little bit disrespectful to customers because, like I mentioned, one of the features that I really do like about this amplifier is the two master volumes. You've got that master that, with the amp without the Footswitch, that second master doesn't work. It completely is disengaged. when you put the Footswitch in is the only time that you can use it, which means that no gigging, touring guitar player is going to use this. They're going to need the proper one, and Victory are gouging you for the proper one to use an actual feature on the amplifier. And that is something that just kind of irks me, rubs me the wrong way. There's even examples on the Victory Amps owners group on Facebook of people modifying their stock Footswitches to have removable cable and just make them a lot more professional. And I've even seen comments from people saying that Victory themselves have provided customers with kits to do this to their stock Footswitches when the cable inevitably breaks. Why don't Victory just do it from the factory? And the thing that's kind of crazy about it is they have their own amp factory. One of the co-owners is the actual factory owner themselves that make this amplifier. They make the amps in the UK, and they do the made in China Footswitch. They are absolutely cheaping out here. But hey, that's just a pet peeve of mine, is when the Footswitches are not designed as well as the amplifiers. I think it's where it lets it down. But hey, that might not be a feature that you care about, so it maybe doesn't matter to you. Now, overall, what do I think about this amplifier? I think that depending on your taste and style, it's a good sounding amplifier with features that you might very much appreciate. But at the same time, my biggest problem is the switch on the back. I mean, that's a huge tonal shaping feature that is kind of thrust upon you every time without you even knowing it. And that's kind of the thing that I really found annoying throughout gigging with this amplifier. I haven't had another amplifier annoy me as much, or another feature on another amplifier annoy me as much as that. If they just put it on the front, if I could just tell whether it was on or not from visuals, just an LED, something, then it would be fine. But at present, it was, when I was playing this, when I was gigging with this amp, the bane of my existence was that, because I'd always forget about it until I plugged it in and went, oh, where's my bass? So those are my thoughts on the amplifier. It might suit you and it might not, but just so that you know, there are pros and cons about this amplifier. So that's my review of the Victory VX Kraken Mark 1. If you like the video, like it. If you want to subscribe, you can. And I'll maybe see you next time. Bye bye.